Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to this chat session about inclusive education. I'm Gordon Porter, the Director of Inclusive Education Canada. And in these sessions, we talk to people across Canada in different jobs and who hold different roles, play different roles, about their perspective on inclusive education in Canada at this time. And I'm joined today in our conversation with Diane Richler, who's the chair of the Catalyst on Inclusive Education Initiative of Inclusion International. And Diane's also a former executive vice president of Inclusion Canada and has had a lot of experience both in our country as well as globally on inclusive education issues. Our other additional colleague and co-host is Jackie Speck, and Jackie's a professor of education at Western University in London, Ontario, and she's the director of the Canadian Research Centre on Inclusive Education and works with colleagues across the country on research projects and various other collaborative efforts with her peers in universities in our country. So the three of us are the hosts, and we welcome to our chat table today Cornelia Schneider, who's the professor of education and director of the teacher education program at Mount Saint Vincent University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And Cornelia has a broad set of experiences with inclusion in different countries. She's originally from Germany and did her initial teacher training there, but she did her master's degree and I believe her PhD in France in several locations, including the Sorbonne. When she completed her PhD in 2006, and she's been teaching at Mount Saint Vincent since 2007. Cornelia's research and teaching focuses on people who are involved in educational process, especially children themselves, and has focused on sociology of childhood, disability studies, and various other components of making inclusion a reality. She's done research in Canada as well as in France, Germany, Portugal, Hungary, Sweden, and Honduras. So she's well versed in the topic, and Cornelia, welcome to our chat.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor.
So you're now in Halifax. How can you tell us about how you think inclusion is going in your home province at the moment?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think it depends on from which lens you're looking at it. There's a lot of work going on right now around inclusion and around accessibility in Nova Scotia generally, because we have the Accessibility Act, which creates, which is called Access by Design, which is supposed to create accessibility and inclusion across the province by 2030. So full inclusion and full accessibility. I'm currently involved in a committee that actually works out these standards in Nova Scotia for the education sector. And so you hear on one side experiences of parents, of students that haven't been necessarily positive, that have been lacking of support, lacking of whatever didn't work in the classroom. On the other hand, it is also really an interesting and an exciting time, because there's a lot of stuff happening, and it seems that across all sectors in education, a lot of thought is put into accessibility and inclusion. So I see it at the education level for the public sector. I see it at the post-secondary sector. It was actually interesting. I attended recently a conference in France, well, virtually in these times, But it was really interesting to have conversations with people from outside the province and outside the country who actually, you know, were then looking inside on what we're doing, and who were quite amazed actually about the dynamics that are certainly existing. You know, the amount of expertise and the amount of time and support and participation that goes into this work. So, you know, so it's kind of, it kind of gives you different perspectives on the situation. Now, having said that, I surely hope that this dynamic will remain no matter what government of the day is in charge, and that actually the means and the support goes into actually really keeping, you know, keeping on track with this and keep pushing for it, that we really get there. So I'm also involved into, well, as you said earlier, I'm involved, I'm directing the BD program right now at the Mount. And we have, we're just in the process of getting a new BD program approved that has a big, you know, much bigger focus on inclusive practices than we used to have. And also that will shift the focus from a really more special ed exceptionalities based focus to a really inclusion, disability studies focus. So really to look at practices such as universal design for learning, culturally responsive pedagogies, etc., so that we actually also start training our teachers much better than we've done so far.
So in the last number of years, those of us outside Nova Scotia have been aware that inclusion has been a rather hot topic from time to time, depending on the teachers' unions and the public and the politicians. How do you see that at the moment? Has it calmed down, or is there a greater sense of focus and unity on what the goal is and how people can work together to achieve it than there has been in, say, in the last decade?
Well, obviously, you know, we're in pandemic times, so a lot of things have shifted that we didn't necessarily want to see shifting. You know, I mean, so I think the Students First report in Nova Scotia that has that came out of mostly union protests and teachers actually only doing work to rule and things like that, has certainly helped to pacify some of that, because, you know, like that Student First report was, you know, was a commission that had union representation right at the table in terms of the people that wrote the report, right? So I think that brought kind of the union a little bit into the mix. Now, having said that, obviously, you know, the pandemic, there's so much stuff going on in the school system right now, including the inclusion of children with disabilities. So it hasn't been easy. And I think across the country, it hasn't been easy at all to manage this right now. So, you know, where people are wondering, the monies that were allocated for inclusion were kind of are being, you know, continuously being allocated, but at the same time, you have to wonder what reaches the kids that need them. I know of families who have kept their kids home all year because, you know, kids with disabilities might have pre-existing conditions, etc., where the parents just didn't feel safe to send them back to school, and their inclusion has been very problematic, to say the least, right? So, but as I said, like right now, I think people just, yeah, the school system has been a little bit in survival mode, even in a place like Nova Scotia, where we just like this week only moved on, you know, like shut all the schools down. So I mean, our school year has been relatively uninterrupted compared to other places. But at the same time, yeah, it certainly raises a bunch of questions, and you gotta wonder when you know, when the pandemic like subsides, hopefully, what is going to happen in terms of these discussions, because they'll come back to the table for sure.
And I'm taking from what you said that generally things were better than they had been, say, 3, 5, 10 years ago.
I would say so, yes, I would say so. But that doesn't necessarily take into account the families that are still fighting for things.
Right.
So,
Sure.
as I said, I mean, you see both dynamics kind of happening in parallel, like you see the work that is happening and where so many people sit at the same table and actually work in the right direction, at least from my perspective. And then on the other hand, you hear about parents and families' experiences that are still, sometimes really borderline in terms of, a real inclusive experience. So,
Right. Right.
So I wonder if, we think about, as you said, in Nova Scotia, you've been relatively unharmed by the pandemic to date, and kids have been going to school. And as you say, some people might have chosen to keep their students at home. But I'm wondering now, with the move to everybody doing remote learning, it might be a bit early, but can you foresee issues based on what we know is going on in other provinces like Ontario, where we seem to spend every other week where we're on lockdown and in online? What are some of those issues, I guess, you wonder about or worry about that could come out of only having remote learning?
Well, I mean, I think in that sense, we are the kids that have been going to school all year and have moved now to online or remote learning. There we are at the intersection of other things as well, right? So there's the issue of access to internet, access, social class. So who are the families that can actually support having their kids at home, supporting them in their online learning, helping them out. Where is the teacher assistant in all of this now, the EPA, or like all these kind of questions. And honestly, I mean, right now I just see it from our perspective because we have our students are in practicum right now as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, from just managing the technology into all the other things. But generally, people say they're better prepared than they were last year. So that's already a plus. But I think it's a little bit early to say because, I mean, officially this starts only tomorrow. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know yet, but I see a lot of people just trying to wrap their heads around it, including our own BD students.
Right.
Can I switch gears for a sec? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sure. No, go ahead. It's okay.
Okay, sorry. I wanted to switch gears because I'm really interested in your international perspective. And just thinking about two systems that you would know well in both Germany and France, would have education systems that are much more, I'm not sure if structured is the right way, but students are streamed much more. And I think there are different challenges when one talks about inclusion. So I thought your comment on the reaction from your colleagues in France or other international colleagues that what's happening in Nova Scotia sounds so rich. I'm wondering if you can comment a little bit on the difference when you first got to know Canada and even now. How are the challenges here with promoting inclusion different from what they would be elsewhere in systems that maybe aren't as heterogeneous as ours are?
It's a good question. How much time do you have? So yeah, I mean, all three countries are very, in certain ways, very different. And then there are also similarities in other ways. So France is still grappling a lot with the question of, what actually disability is and what it means. And so there's a very strong medical or psychological lens on the work that they're doing, which has some benefits to it, but which is really in the way of doing inclusive work in a way that it actually can work in a classroom. So France it's not necessarily a streaming system, that much as Germany would be. But France is a system that is, is very standardized. And so the idea of children not learning the same thing during a school year is really a tough one to sell to French teachers at this point. I mean, there's, like the younger generations are having an easier time with this, but the older ones are definitely having a bit more trouble with that. So so there's really this idea of not everyone has to reach the same outcomes at the same time, at the same pace, and all these kind of things is really a hard sell at times in France. And so instead of like changing the school, like the kids have to fit into what the school is doing. In Germany, it's a little bit different. Germany, yes, is more streaming, much more streaming. Having said that, like certain perspectives on inclusive education are like it depends on the region that you're in, because it's a federal country like Canada. So you have very progressive practices, say for example in Berlin or in Hamburg, or rather in the north of Germany, whereas other places like Bavaria or the south struggle more with it. And the presence of a special school system there is still quite strong. So they're trying to actually do a lot of collaborations now between special schools and regular schools, which is also an interesting model, but which often like gives teachers maybe a little bit of an excuse to sneak out on actually changing their practices. But so that's kind of.
And can we learn from both of those systems? What do you think we can learn from them?
I think in terms of the German system, what you can learn potentially, I don't know. there's like from what I like, especially during my time when I did my PhD, the practices I've seen in those classrooms are are really, really interesting. So where actually it's not only including kids with disabilities, but where actually the classrooms just moved into a very radical direction with age diverse classrooms. So where you have grade 1 to grade 4 in the same class, and the kids, like each quarter of each age range, and the kids learn together, work together, peer support, buddy systems, so actually they're taking diversity to the next level and actually making it a strength of the classroom, like from the get-go. And I found those practices incredibly impressive, because like especially when you walk in and observe in your own during the PhD time, and you have these little people that are 6-7 years old, and they know exactly what they have to do. They don't they go, they do their things, they have their way of working, they're independent and all these kind of things, and it's set up in a system that just runs itself in a certain way. I know there's a lot of work behind it, obviously, but basically the teachers say, well, every year we get, out of 25 kids, we get about 5-6 new ones. The older ones graduate into the next one. The younger ones come in, and they just the older ones tell them what to do, and so it kind of just reproduces itself. It's a lot of peer socialization happening and things like that, and the kids with disabilities are part of that. So they just learn with the group that just works the best with their current learning level and things like that. So it's a really beneficial system. And entire schools in Germany function that way, which is really interesting and really exciting.
That's really similar to here. You have very good models.
Yeah.
But they aren't necessarily systemic across a province or across the region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, they're not necessarily in the entire state of whatever, Hamburg or Berlin or whatever, but there's a good number of schools that actually do just that. So and yeah, it's like the satisfaction of work for the teachers in that system is really incredible. Like the amount of like the rewarding experience for the teachers that comes out of that is really remarkable.
So do you see the possibility of importing some of those ideas here? Are you building that into your teacher training?
Well, as I said, we're just redeveloping the BD program, and I signed myself into teaching the inclusive practices course together with my colleague Mary Jane Harkins, and it's certainly like we're just in the early stages of preparing those courses, but it's certainly part of some of the conversations that will happen in those classrooms, because I think people are looking for solutions, and you know, when you kind of start having people think in a different way and think outside the box that they're used to, and actually, you know, because here, like very often still when I hear about multi-age classrooms, for example, people are like, it's more of a nuisance than something productive. So, you know, where it's like, well, but did you actually think about it in a different way? Like, what does that actually, what could that actually mean? What could you actually use for your advantage if you're actually that lucky to have a split grade, you know? So those are certainly things that I think would be fantastic if people start thinking about it, and then maybe in the long run start implementing it as part of their practice.
How do you find the attitudes of the young people who are taking your program towards inclusion? Are they assuming that's the way schools will be and they're there to learn how to do it? Or do they still have questions about whether schools should be inclusive or not?
Well, I think I see a little bit of both. You know, I mean, officially Nova Scotia has had a full inclusion policy, even if it didn't necessarily work perfectly, since 1996. So the students we get now have run through the entire system like this, right? So, you know, I mean, I looked at birth date of a student the other day because I had to look up some records, and that student was born in 1999. So, you know, these are the generations that have been, you know, have been schooled with people with disabilities, kids with disabilities in the classroom. So for many of them, there's an awareness that they bring in, and the social justice lens they actually already bring into the program. And it's a good number of them. You know, obviously, yes, there are others where it's harder. And then there's obviously also sometimes, you know, practicum experiences might actually make them a little bit more skeptical of it, right? So, you know, like we had a student not that long ago who was really incensed about the amount of IPPs that she encountered in the classroom that she was assigned to do a practicum in. And we said, well, this is your chance to build knowledge and expertise around this. Like, this is exactly, yeah, you know, it might be extreme or bigger than what other classes might have, but at the same time, this is a good chance, and you can actually do this together with a teacher instead of, you know, being confronted with this all by yourself. But yeah, so, you know, like these kind of things, I see in our BD students, they are incredibly open and excited and trying to make a difference. Now, they don't necessarily know yet what that means, or, you know, or how easy or how difficult that might be, but there's generally a good attitude, I think. And as I said, yes, you know, then you have others that are only saying, well, I'm in the program just to teach algebra all day long, and I don't care about who's in my classroom. So, you know, I mean, yes, you have that attitude too, but I mean, they don't get that far with that anymore these days. I mean, you know, if I look back in my own schooling time, that was certainly still a big thing when I went to high school back in Germany. But I don't see that those individuals are really, you know, getting a strong foothold in the system as it is right now.
And do you think that there's things we can do within our faculties of education to sort of promote that idea that you teach students and the diverse range of those students rather than a subject?
For sure. I mean, this is definitely something we've been trying to convey for a long time. I mean, our faculty generally right now, we are in a phase of, you know, where the Mount has been very lucky because we keep being allowed to hire, even despite, you know, complicated situations. We just finished a hiring round for Black scholars, for example. So, and actually we're going to get 2 of these colleagues in the Faculty of Education. So we just finished our recommendation. We are really excited because I think the more we have people that come from all walks of life and all kinds of communities, the more it will reflect, you know, also the teachers that we would like to graduate in the long run from the program. So the Mount is still predominantly very white. But you know, you can see now slowly the immigrant kids coming in. We're encouraging students from Indigenous and African Nova Scotian communities to come in. So we're trying to develop that on that. And, you know, we're hoping to, you know, because very often disabilities in the students with disabilities in the program, we have a lot of them, but they're also a bit invisible because very often those are learning disabilities that are, you know, handled by the accommodation request that is sent to us from accessibility services, but they are not necessarily like visible representatives of any disabilities or of the disability community. But I'm also hoping actually in the long run that we will be able to increase presence of those students as well, and make sure that they actually can get into the teaching profession, so that we have also more representation on that. And right now it's
And
like,
how about you? Yeah, sorry, your Mountability program that you helped.
Yeah.
Does that play in at all in the Faculty of Education?
Well, it is like run by us. So, you know, like I'm one of the faculty advisors. My colleague Mary Jane Harkins, who I mentioned earlier, is another one.
You want to explain what that is?
Yes, for sure. Yes, Mountability is a inclusive post-secondary education program. So our program is funded by the Department of Labor and Advanced Education, and gives actually students with disabilities access to academic learning who would, by their credits or, you know, high school diplomas or whatsoever, actually not qualify to go to university. So it's a program where they come into the Mount. They can take courses at their, like, whatever they see fit in their interests. And it's mostly about they participate in the courses in the form of a participatory audit. So they have an audit status, but are encouraged, and we talk a lot with the faculty that teach these courses to make them participate as much as possible in assignments, in activities, group work, whatever is happening in the course. So yeah, this program is like, we have 3 in the province now. So it got started at Acadia University, and we are the second site in Nova Scotia. And then just last year, Cape Breton University started one as well. And we hope that we can expand it, that each university in Nova Scotia actually has a site like this. So
who would the students be? Can you describe the students who would?
Sure, yeah. So right now, like we have officially 5 seats. We added a 6th one because we just felt like we were able to manage, and we wanted to give more students opportunities. So we have one of our students has Down syndrome, one is on the autism spectrum, others have learning disabilities. I know at Acadia they had a student a few years back who had a neurodegenerative disease, so who had a very disrupted schooling time because of, you know, being in hospitals and whatever institutions during the time he grew up. So yeah, so there's like, so it's really folks that don't necessarily have the academic credits to access university, but have a desire to be part of the academic experience. So yeah, and it's been a really, really interesting and rewarding experience, because our students have benefited so much from all of this. They have been, like they have been taking up space on campus. They have, they're doing courses, but they're also present on campus. So, from working at the library, volunteering in certain activities, taking up assistantships with us. We have one student who's on student council. And those are all things that we didn't come up with that. They entered campus, they started to take the courses, and they started to look around, and then they decided that certain things were really their interest. We have another student who we have a little art gallery at the Mount, and like we have art shows and stuff, and she's totally involved into this. So yeah, and again, none of this was our idea. That really like just
We're running out of time,
so good.
but I want to give both Jackie and Diane a chance to ask a final question if they would like to. Diane?
I wanted to actually go back to the beginning, so it may not be a short answer, but you were talking about accessibility, and so often accessibility focuses on physical access.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what other aspects of accessibility are being considered, particularly maybe for persons who have intellectual disabilities, communication challenges.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, as you said, like the term of accessibility is often really used for buildings and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, in the education context, it goes beyond that. It's you need to have access to knowledge, access to learning, access to how things are working. So in the context of what we're talking about of disability, it's a term that goes together with inclusion. It goes together with participation. It goes together with equity. So I mean, you hear them popping up across the country in terms of EDIA terms that you see very often at universities and other places. So yeah, so I think granting access is one thing, by creating, for example, using methods such as universal design for learning and all these kind of things. But then, with these methods to actually then reach the possibility for children or students to be part of something, to belong, and to participate, I think that's then the kind of step that where accessibility is basically the stepping stone to that, at least from my definition, my perspective. I hope that makes sense.
Thanks. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Jackie?
Yeah, I guess that really comes back to that issue around mountability, and if that showing the strengths of people, despite the disability, and being part of campus, if that's really something that's useful for teacher candidates to see, because they're going to go and work with the students before they come into that university setting. And I think that might just help with that whole attitude about thinking of what people can do rather than what people can't do.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, I mean, our students are in the undergrad program for Mountability. So, and as I said, they're part of the campus. They're like, it has become a normalcy in a certain way. Yeah, and generally speaking, as I said, like the generation, most of the students we get now in the BD program, for example, have grown up that way. So I think it makes a difference. I mean, yes, there will always be skeptics, and it's not always easy to find how to make it work. But at the same time, I think because people have seen it and have generally a rather positive attitude towards it, it makes our work a little bit easier, even though we still have to challenge a lot of things and you know and try to put the right ideas into place and all these kind of things. So yeah, not all the work is done, but
It's better.
I have one final question, and that is, what's your own personal research going to be in the next few years? What are you curious about, and what are you looking forward to when the current time is past and we're into typical times in Canada?
Yeah, if I ever get to do research again, you mean?
Yes.
Given everything that's going on. Yeah, so I mean, there are different strands that I'm really interested in. So first of all, I want to explore actually that post-secondary experience a little bit, given, you know, that the program is 5 years old now, and that we have these things, you know, to kind of explore a little bit what the experience is, what the impact is. So that's going to be one of the strands. Then another one is certainly going to be around the inclusive practices course that I mentioned earlier, to kind of explore what, you know, how this is going to work, how it's going to make an impact and all these kind of things. And then lastly, there's just some other things going on. I mean, again, you know, it will depend on you know, how much travel you can do again and things like that. So I'm certainly, the comparative lens on inclusion is really continues to be a really interesting and intriguing part of the work that I've been doing. So I hope I can pick up some pieces again. I mean, the work in Honduras has been pretty much on hold for now, for a while, because also of mat leaves and all these kind of things. So we had to cut back a little bit on travel. But so that's another thing. And then there's other things, you know, around experiences of kids. Actually, there's a project that I've had in mind for a long time, which is actually about experiences of children riding the school bus. So, and that will include, you know, all kinds of children, not only kids with disabilities, but also kids who just take the bus every day, and what that means to be on that bus and to travel with others, and what happens when you're there, and all these kind of things.
Because well, Cornelia, it's good to know that someone with your deep experience and commitment to inclusion is in charge of teacher education at one of our Canadian universities, and we appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing your thoughts. Thanks.